7:23 a.m., June 7, 1944. Soviet tank commander Nikolai Petrov could scarcely believe what his periscope was showing him. A lone German Tiger tank. Just one. And before him lay the burning wreckage of 3 T-34s. Tanks that had been part of his formation just 5 minutes ago. Petrov was leading 18 T-34 tanks. 18 against 1. The math was undeniable. The superiority, overwhelming. But something twisted in his gut as he took in the precise placement of each burning wreck. 3 shots, 3 hits, 3 dead crews. The Tiger hadn't moved. It was waiting. And in that moment, Petrov knew he wasn't fighting a tank. He was fighting a demon of steel. The Eastern Front in June of 1944 was a meat grinder. Soviet offensives rolled over German defensive lines like tsunamis. The Red Army had the initiative. They had the numbers. For every T-34 destroyed, 3 more appeared. The German tank crews knew this. They saw it every day. Tanks burn quickly. People burn even faster. The average lifespan of a tank commander on the Eastern Front was 43 days. 43 days between their first deployment and a burning metal tomb. First Lieutenant Franz Weber had already survived 187 days. His Tiger Fairs number 217 bore the scars of 23 hits. None had penetrated its 100mm armor. But Weber knew that luck eventually runs out. Every battle could be his last. Weber wasn't just any tank commander. Born in Heidelberg in 1919, son of a high school teacher. He had studied mechanical engineering for 2 years before the war changed everything. This education made him unique. He didn't just understand how to drive a tank. He understood how it worked, every gear, every hydraulic cylinder, every weakness. He handpicked this crew, his 4th, not by rank, but by ability, by compatibility, by that indefinable something that turns 5 individuals into a unit. Müller had the best eyes in the entire Panzer Division. He could identify enemy tanks at 1,500 meters when others saw only shadows. Schmidt was the strongest man Weber had ever met. He could load a 23-kilogram armor-piercing shell in 3.7 seconds. Standard was 6 seconds. In combat, those 2.3 seconds meant life or death. Klein was nervous, yes. But his fingers danced across radio frequencies like a pianist across keys. And Bauer, the driver, had an uncanny feel for terrain. He could maneuver a 56-ton tank through mud as if it were a limousine on asphalt. They had trained together for 3 weeks before their first deployment. Not the usual 3 days, 3 weeks. Weber had insisted on it. They had simulated every emergency. Engine failure under fire, turret malfunction during a flanking attack, loss of the commander. Every scenario repeated 100 times until it became instinct. In combat, Weber had told them, you don't have time to think. Your body has to know what to do before your brain realizes it. They had laughed then. After their first engagement, no one laughed. After their third engagement, they understood. This current crew had been together for 94 days. 94 days spent more inside the Tiger than outside it. 94 days spent learning to communicate without words. A glance from Weber and Müller knew which target. A hand movement from Schmidt and Bauer knew which direction. This was no longer a crew. This was an organism, a single being in 5 bodies. That morning had begun with fog, thick fog that turned the vast fields west of Vitebsk into a milky hell. Weber's radio crackled. Soviet tank column identified. Estimated 15 to 20 vehicles. Heading south-southwest. Directly towards the German lines. Weber looked at his crew. Gunner Hans Müller, 19 years old, from Munich. Loader Kurt Schmidt, 22, from Hamburg. Radio operator Peter Klein, 20, from Dresden. Driver Wilhelm Bauer, 24, from Stuttgart. 5 men in a steel capsule. 5 lives dependent on the next shot, but also 5 lives who trusted each other like brothers, more than brothers. You don't choose family. These men had chosen each other. The first rule of tank warfare: whoever shoots first survives. The second rule: positioning is everything. Weber didn't learn these rules from textbooks. He had paid for them with the lives of his comrades, 3 previous crews, 27 men who had fought beside him. 16 hadn't survived. Their names were etched into his memory. He murmured them before every engagement like a prayer. "For the fallen," he said quietly. Müller, the gunner, nodded. He understood. They all understood. The Soviet column moved slowly through the fog. T-34 tanks, the workhorse of the Red Army, fast, agile, mass-produced. A single T-34 was inferior to the Tiger, but 18 against 1? The Soviets trusted in their numbers. Their tactic was simple: overrun, encircle, overwhelm. It had worked at Kursk. It had worked at Korsun. It would work here. Petrov was an experienced commander, 47 years old, a veteran of Moscow, Stalingrad, Kursk. He had destroyed 38 German tanks, an Iron Cross, Soviet style. He respected the Tiger. Every Soviet tank driver respected the Tiger. But respect didn't mean fear, not when you had 18 against 1. Petrov spoke into his radio. All units, swarming tactics, groups of 3, pincer the Tiger. Force him to turn. When he attacks one group, the others strike. It was 7:17 a.m. when Weber saw them for the first time, dark silhouettes moving through the thinning fog. His heart quickened, not from fear, from something else, a cold calculation that took over in moments like these. He counted quickly: 6, 8, 10, more behind them, at least 15, maybe 18. Müller. His voice was calm, almost conversational. T-34, second row, third from the left. Distance 1,200 meters. Side armor exposed. "Target acquired," Müller replied. His hand on the elevation wheel was steady. No nervousness. Not anymore. Not after 57 engagements. Schmidt, load armor-piercing round. Armor-piercing round loaded, the mechanical click of the breech. A sound that calmed Weber. His tank was ready. His crew was ready. Fire! The 88mm cannon roared. The entire Tiger shook. For 1.2 seconds, the armor-piercing shell flew through the morning air. 1,200 meters. Then it hit. The T-34 didn't explode immediately. First came the impact, a dull thud as the shell punched through the side armor. Then, a split second later, the ammunition inside detonated. The turret hatches flew into the air like toys. Flames shot 30 feet high. The crew hadn't had a chance. 4 men, erased in an instant. "Target destroyed," Müller said emotionlessly, but Weber saw his hand tremble, just a little. Enough. The reaction was instant. The Soviet formation exploded into motion. Petrov screamed orders. "Spread out, scatter, find him!" 9 T-34s swarmed to the left, 8 to the right. They were hunting for the muzzle flash. They were hunting the Tiger tank. "Bauer, reverse 200 meters, then northwest position," Weber commanded. The Tiger began to move, 56 tons of steel, maneuvering with surprising grace. Bauer was an artist. He knew every tree, every ditch, every piece of cover in this sector. They'd studied this terrain for 3 days. Now it was paying off. 7:21 a.m., second shot. A T-34 had spotted them and was turning to present its frontal armor. Smart commander, but not smart enough. Weber waited. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. The T-34 turned too far. Side armor exposed. Müller, now! Boom! Another hit. This T-34 died quieter. The shell pierced the engine compartment. No explosion. Just a sudden screeching halt. Then smoke. Then flames. The crew tried to evacuate. 3 men made it out of the hatches. 2 didn't. Weber forced himself not to look, not to think, just to fight, just to survive. Petrov cursed. 2 tanks, 2 hits. The Tiger was invisible. No, not invisible. Mobile. It wouldn't stay still. Every time it fired, it moved. Textbook tactics, but perfectly executed. All units, Petrov's voice showed the first cracks. Suppressive fire on suspected position. Force him to keep his head down. 16 T-34s opened fire. Shells slammed into the ground around Weber's previous position. Earth exploded into the air. Trees shattered. A 76mm shell grazed the Tiger, bouncing off the angled frontal armor like a stone off water. Inside, a deafening gong. Klein, the radio operator, screamed, not in pain, in shock, his first engagement. "Klein!" Weber's voice cut through the panic. "Message to battalion. Enemy contact. At least 16 T-34s. Do not require support. Repeat, do not require support. But First Lieutenant, no support. We'll tie them down here. If more tanks come, the line will break." Klein nodded. He didn't really understand, but he trusted. 7:28 a.m., third shot. A T-34 had reached a flanking position, 800 meters, dangerously close. Müller swiveled the turret. 18 seconds to turn 75 degrees. Too slow. The T-34 fired first. The shell hit the right side of the Tiger on 40 millimeters of side armor. A dull thud. The entire vehicle vibrated. "Damage!" Weber screamed. "No penetration!" Schmidt answered. "Skirt absorbed it." Müller had the target. "A fire!" The T-34 tried to evade. Too late. The shell caught it in the turret. A critical hit. The turret lifted up, hung in the air for a surreal moment, then crashed back down. Flames erupted from every opening. No one got out. "That was too close," Schmidt muttered. "It's going to get closer," Weber said. He was right. The Soviet tanks were getting more aggressive. They'd overcome their fear. Now came the rage, the determination. That was more dangerous than fear. Petrov saw 3 burning tanks, 3 crews, 15 men, dead or dying. For one Tiger, one damn Tiger. His hands clenched around the turret edge. He had orders. Break this line. At any cost. Volga Group. Frontal assault on suspected position. Don Group. Flanking maneuver south. Dnieper Group. Flanking maneuver north. We'll crush him. 5 T-34s raced directly toward Weber's position. A suicide run, but effective. They forced him to react. 7:34 a.m. Fourth shot. The lead T-34 of the frontal group exploded. 1,100 meters. Clean hit to the frontal armor. The 88mm gun made the T-34's weakness glaringly obvious. The sloped armor was no match for that kind of penetration power. But the other 4 kept coming. 900 meters, 800, 700. Bauer, reverse, now! The Tiger backed up, but not fast enough. 2 T-34s opened fire. 1 shell missed, the other hit, left side, below the turret. A terrible screech of metal on metal. The Tiger shook like a wounded animal. Penetration? Negative, but drive damaged. We're losing speed. That was bad. An immobile Tiger was a dead Tiger. Müller, rapid fire, hold them back. 5th shot, 650 meters. Another T-34 disintegrated. 6th shot, 600 meters, hit to the turret, but not critical. The T-34 kept fighting. 7th shot, same T-34, 550 meters. This time, the shell ripped through the already weakened armor. Internal detonation. No one escaped. The 2 surviving T-34s of the frontal group stopped. Their nerves broke. 6 comrade tanks burning in front of them. The Tiger still stood. They turned away. Petrov saw it. He understood. Frontal assaults wouldn't work, but his flanking groups were in position. Don Group, 5 T-34s, 600 meters south. Dnieper Group, 4 T-34s, 700 meters north, the Tiger was in the middle. Both groups, simultaneous attack. He can't cover both sides at once. Now, 7:41 a.m. 9 Soviet tanks moved at the same time, from 2 directions. This was the moment Petrov had been waiting for. Endgame. Weber saw them coming, north and south. His hand hovered over the control panel. A split-second decision. Which group was more dangerous? South was closer, but north had better positioning. Turret north, fast. The turret swung. 90 degrees, 18 seconds, an eternity. The southern group fired. 3 shells simultaneously. One missed, one ricocheted, one hit rear armor. The weakest point, a tremendous blow. The Tiger lurched forward. "Engine!" Bauer screamed. "Engine running erratically! We're losing coolant! Keep it alive!" Weber turned to Müller. "Fire on north!" 8th shot, 700 meters. Hit. A T-34 of the Dnieper group died. 9th shot, 720 meters. Missed. That was rare. Müller cursed. 10th shot, 680 meters. Hit. Another one burns. But the southern group was getting closer. 400 meters, 350. In tank warfare, that was knife-fighting range. At these distances, even a T-34 could kill a Tiger. Turret south! Turret south! The turret spun back. Too slow. The Soviets fired again. 2 hits. One grazed the turret ring. Dangerous. A second pierced the skirt and bounced off the main armor. But the cumulative damage was adding up. 11th shot. 320 meters. Point blank for a Tiger tank, and the T-34 exploded with such force that pieces rained down on the Tiger. 12th shot. 340 meters. Another one bites the dust. 13th shot. 380 meters. The last T-34 of the southern group tried to escape. The shell caught it in the engine. It burned slowly. The crew evacuated. 3 made it out. 2 were cut down by machine gun fire from German infantry. First Lieutenant Weber didn't see that. He only saw the northern group. 3 T-34s remaining, 600 meters, and they held their position. Smart. They were out of direct range for effective T-34 fire, but the Tiger could reach them. This was a duel of nerves. 7:49 a.m. The fog had completely lifted. Weber's Tiger stood in the center of a field of burning wrecks. 9 T-34s were destroyed, 3 evacuated with damage, 6 still functional. But the psychological damage was more devastating than the physical. Petrov sat in his T-34, staring at the battlefield. 12 tanks, 60 men. At least 45 dead or wounded, for one Tiger, one single Tiger. His hands trembled, not from fear, from rage, from frustration, from the growing understanding that military superiority wasn't just a matter of numbers. His radio crackled. His remaining commanders were asking for orders. What should he say? Advance. Send more men into the meat grinder. But orders were orders. Dnieper Group, retreat 200 meters, suppressive fire. Volga Group, collect the evacuated crews. Medical support. A retreat. Without calling it a retreat, Weber watched the T-34s pull back. He took his first full breath in 30 minutes. Status report, all positions. Miller, main gun operational. 14 armor-piercing rounds remaining. Schmidt, loading mechanism intact. No injuries. Klein, radio working. No contact with battalion for 10 minutes. Bauer, engine overheating, coolant at 40%, another hour maximum. We don't have an hour, Weber said. He knew what was coming. The Soviets would reorganize. Maybe call in reinforcements. Maybe artillery. Maybe air support. A stationary Tiger in daylight was a target. First Lieutenant, Klein's voice was hesitant. Shouldn't we request evacuation and abandon this line? Do you know what's behind it? Field hospital, Schmidt said quietly. 700 wounded. Silence. They all understood. If the Soviet tanks broke through, 700 wounded soldiers would die. Many couldn't walk. Many couldn't defend themselves. We stay, Weber said, until reinforcements arrive, or we run out of ammunition. 8:07 a.m. The Soviet tanks were moving again, but this time cautiously. They kept their distance, 800 meters, 900, out of effective range for their 76mm guns, but not for the Tiger's 88mm. It was a psychological game. They were trying to force Weber to waste ammunition, or they were waiting for reinforcements. 14th shot, 850 meters, missed. The distance and movement made precision difficult. 15th shot, 900 meters, hit. A T-34 exploded, 10 destroyed. Petrov couldn't watch anymore. He was an experienced commander. He had survived Stalingrad. But this was different. This was domination. Technical, tactical, psychological domination. His radio came to life. Reports from other sectors. 2 more Tigers had been identified, 3 kilometers to the east. The Soviet offensive was being stalled everywhere, not by numbers, by quality, by skill, by men like the commander in the Tiger in front of him. All units, retreat to secondary lines, we await artillery support. His voice cracked on the last word. 8:23 a.m. The remaining T-34s turned away. They weren't driving. They weren't fleeing. But they were retreating with the speed of men who had seen enough. Weber let them go. He had 5 armor-piercing rounds left and a field hospital to defend. Klein, report to battalion. Enemy attack repelled. 10 confirmed kills, 3 probable. Tiger 217 operational but damaged, requesting mechanics and resupply. The reply came 5 minutes later. Reinforcements en route. 2 hours. Hold position. 2 hours, Weber repeated. He looked at his crew. Miller leaned against the turret wall, eyes closed. Not sleeping, just exhausted. Schmidt mechanically checked the loading mechanism again and again. A nervous habit. Klein was crying softly. No one said anything. Bauer was smoking a cigarette, forbidden in the tank. Weber said nothing. They had earned it. 10, Miller said suddenly. We killed 10. We destroyed 10 tanks, Weber corrected. 50 men, Miller said. At least 50 men are dead because of us. And 700 are alive because of us, Schmidt said. His tone was sharp. The hospital, the wounded, they're alive. Miller opened his eyes. Do you think that makes it better? No, Weber replied. It makes it necessary, and that's all. Necessary. Silence. The smell of cordite and sweat filled the cramped space. Outside, 3 T-34s were still burning. Black smoke rose into the blue morning sky. Somewhere in there were 50 men, fathers, sons, brothers, people with names that Weber would never know, people he had killed to save other people he also would never know. That's how war was. Not glorious, just necessary, just terrible. 9:17 am. The day was now hot. The June sun beat down on the damaged Tiger. Inside, it was hell. 40 degrees Celsius, maybe more. The crew had taken off their jackets. Sweat dripped from every face. But they stayed in position. Because 700 men behind them needed them to. At 10:38 a.m., the first German reinforcements arrived. 3 Panzer IVs, a handful of infantry. Not much, but enough. The Tiger could be evacuated. Mechanics worked feverishly on the engine. The cooling damage was severe but repairable. 3 hours of work. Weber and his crew sat under a tree, 100 meters from their tank. No one spoke. Klein was still shaking. Schmidt stared at his hands. Miller smoked. one after another. Bauer was actually asleep. Exhaustion had overwhelmed him. A captain from the battalion arrived. He looked at the battlefield. The 10 burned-out T-34s, the shell craters, the traces of 9 hours of combat. 10 confirmed kills, he asked. 10, Weber confirmed. With 1 Tiger. With 4 other men, Weber corrected. With a crew. The captain nodded. He understood. Knight's Cross, he said. At least, maybe oak leaves. Weber looked at his crew. 4 young men who had become men that day. Not for honor, not for medals, but for 50 dead enemies and 700 comrades saved. For the entire crew, Weber said, or for no one? The captain hesitated, then nodded. For the entire crew. News of the battle spread fast, on both sides. In the German lines, Tiger 217 became a legend. In Soviet reports, it became a nightmare. Petrov wrote in his report, "Single Tiger tank held off 18 T-34s for 9 hours, 10 tanks destroyed. 3 evacuated with severe damage. Crew demonstrated exceptional tactical skill and discipline. Recommend revision of anti-Tiger doctrine. Current tactics are inadequate." The document was classified, but rumors spread. Soviet tank crews began to regard Tiger tanks with almost mystical fear, not just as a weapon, but as a symbol. A Tiger meant someone was going to die, and most of the time, it was the T-34 crews. The psychological effect was devastating. In some units, T-34 drivers refused to carry out orders if a Tiger was sighted. Commissars had to intervene, sometimes with threats of execution. The fear ran that deep. Weber knew nothing of this. He fought on for another 89 days. On September 4th, 1944, a Soviet 122mm shell struck Tiger 217 on the turret. Penetration, internal detonation. Müller died instantly. Schmidt survived for 3 hours, then succumbed to his burns. Klein lost his right leg. Bauer was hit by shrapnel, but survived. Weber was thrown from the burning Tiger. Severe burns, 3 broken ribs, a concussion. He survived, but a part of him died that day. The part that knew 4 other men. The part that had lived with them for 197 days. The part that knew their names, their fears, their hopes. After the war, Weber lived in seclusion. He rarely spoke about his experiences. But in 1977, at a veterans reunion, he met someone unexpected, Nikolai Petrov. The Soviet commander from that day in 1944. They didn't recognize each other immediately. Then someone started talking about the battle near Vitebsk, about a Tiger that had defeated 18 T-34s. Both men fell silent. Then they looked at each other. "You were in that Tiger," Petrov said. It wasn't a question. "You led the T-34s," Weber replied. Silence. 33 years had passed. The war was long over, but the memories were fresh. "I hated you that day," Petrov said. "You killed 50 of my men." "I hated myself too," Weber said. "Every day since then." They talked for 3 hours about that day, about the war, about the men who had died, about the men who had survived, about the burden they both carried. In the end, they embraced, 2 old soldiers who understood what young men never could, that there are no winners in war, only survivors, and the dead. Petrov died in 1982. Weber died in 1991. Both were honored by veterans from both sides, not for their courage, not for their skill, but because they had understood the terrible truth of war, and because they carried the names. Weber carried the names of his 3 crews, 27 men. Petrov carried the names of the 50 men who died on that June day. They carried those names until they died. These aren't just statistics from dusty archives. These are the moments that decided the fate of millions, real soldiers, real fear, real consequences. These stories must never be forgotten. If these historical truths are important to you, then support me with YouTube's Super Thanks, the golden heart below. Every Super Thanks allows me to spend weeks in archives, digitizing rare documents, interviewing the last eyewitnesses before they fall silent forever. Help me preserve this history for future generations, because if we forget what war really means, we are doomed to repeat it. The technical details of the battle are remarkable. A Tiger I weighed 56 tons. A T-34 weighed 26 tons. The Tiger had 100 millimeters of frontal armor. The T-34 had 45 millimeters. The Tiger's 88mm gun could destroy a T-34 from 2,000 meters. The T-34's 76mm gun could only penetrate a Tiger from 500 meters, on the sides or the rear, never frontally. This wasn't just technical superiority, it was tactical genius. Weber positioned his Tiger so that the T-34s could never achieve an effective firing position. He used terrain, distance, mobility. He forced the Soviets to expose themselves, and every time they did, they paid the price. Modern tank commanders study this battle. NATO doctrine for tank warfare contains principles derived directly from Weber's tactics: positioning before aggression, precision before volume, survivability before heroism. The US Army teaches this battle at the Armor School in Fort Benning, not as an example of German superiority, but as an example of how skill, tactics, and crew coordination can overcome numerical inferiority. It's a lesson that's just as relevant today as it was in 1944. But the human story is more important than the technical. 5 men in a steel capsule. 5 men who knew that every shot could be their last. 5 men who kept fighting, not for ideology, not for conquest, but for 700 wounded soldiers they would never see. That's the essence of soldiering, not aggression. Not violence, but duty. The terrible, necessary duty to kill others in order to save others. Müller, 19 years old, had a girlfriend in Munich. She waited 3 years for him. When the news of his death arrived, she waited another 2 years, hoping it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. She never married. Schmidt, 22 years old, had 3 younger siblings. He sent half his pay home every month. After his death, 47 letters from his little sister were found, unread. He hadn't had time to open them. Klein survived without his right leg. He learned to walk with a prosthesis. He became a teacher. He taught history for 38 years. Every year on June 7th, he spoke about that day, not to glorify it, but to warn. Bauer survived with scars on his back. He became a mechanic. He never repaired tanks, only civilian vehicles. He said he had seen enough war machines for one lifetime. Weber survived with scars that ran deeper than skin. He dreamed every night of burning tanks, of the smell of burned flesh, of the faces of the men he had killed, faces he had never truly seen, but his brain constructed, each detailed, each accusing. The 700 wounded soldiers in the field hospital were evacuated. 623 survived, 77 succumbed to their wounds in the following weeks. But 623 lived. 623 men went home, to families, to children, to lives, because of 5 men in a Tiger tank. In 1983, a German veteran organized a reunion. He invited all surviving hospital patients. 312 attended. Many brought their children, their grandchildren. Weber was there. Klein was there. Bauer was there. They were treated like heroes. Weber hated it. "We are not heroes," he said. "The heroes are the ones who died. Müller, Schmidt, the 50 Soviets. They are the heroes. We're just the ones who survived." But an old man, who had been 19 years old in 1944, approached Weber. He held the hand of a little girl. "This is my granddaughter," the man said. "Without you, I would have died in that hospital. My daughter would never have been born. My granddaughter would not exist." He wept. "You didn't just save me. You saved 3 generations." Weber looked at the little girl. She smiled at him. And for the first time in 39 years, Weber felt that maybe, just maybe, those 50 dead had not died in vain. That maybe their sacrifice, as terrible as it was, had served a purpose. It didn't make it better, but it made it bearable. Today, more than 80 years later, no monument stands on that field near Vitebsk. The burning tanks have long been melted down. The scars on the land have healed, but the story remains in German archives, in Soviet reports, in the memories of the few veterans still living, and now in this video. This was not the largest tank battle of the war. That was Kursk. This was not the decisive battle. That was Stalingrad. But this was the battle that showed what soldiers can do when duty becomes more important than life, when skill becomes more important than numbers, when 5 men decide that 700 others are more important than themselves. That is the lesson of Tiger 217, not military superiority, not technological dominance, but human courage in the face of certain death. The decision to fight, not because you can win, but because others will lose if you don't. That is the legacy of First Lieutenant Franz Weber, Gunner Hans Müller, loader Kurt Schmidt, radio operator Peter Klein, and driver Wilhelm Bauer. 5 names among millions. 5 men who, on a June day in 1944, showed what is possible when skill meets determination, when brotherhood meets duty, when humans decide that other lives are more important than their own. Their story deserves to be remembered, not glorified, not mythologized, but remembered, as a warning, as a lesson, as a tribute to all soldiers who fought not out of hate, but out of duty, not for conquest, but for protection, not for glory, but because no one else could. What impressed you the most about this story? Many viewers have shared incredible family stories, grandfathers who were there, letters found in attics, war diaries that survived generations. Share your family history from this era below. Each comment is a piece of history that we can preserve together. Every memory is valuable. Every name is important. Let's make sure that these men, on both sides, are never forgotten.